So much to think about at the end of the last episode, so I'm a little feverish. I'm excited. It's late. I'm a little tired. I'm feeling a little burnt out. But I didn't want to save this till the next day because, you're going to forget some of it, and I'm not going to be as excited about it because I got stuff to do. And I've got my next videos that I want to do, so that'll distract me. Okay. I guess I'll just start off with the most important things. I think. The important thing I noticed. Number one, Omori's movesets. Yeah, so the one thing I noticed is that Omori's movesets change. At first, he's got this persist, like overcome. What else is there? Calm down, focus, things like that. They're all very like survival orientated and gritty and combative. And then later on, they become cherish, allegro, calm down, and encore, which are creative. And that's an obviously big change. No surprises there. I don't think that's nothing radical. But we see a change from Omori to someone who is creative and actually engaged in the world, and it's messy. What comes of that? He gets into a fight with Basil that probably almost gets one of them killed. But after watching the other endings, I realized that Basil dies if you don't do that. You're essentially saving his life. And they didn't make it super clear, but they did say save Basil when you head to his room. So you are saving his life there. And if you don't, he obviously dies, so. Even though it's messy, it's the better ending. So what is the game telling us from that? I had that evil sequence with like the guy, he's sitting on the throne of hands, and he's like controlling everything. Now, there are two ways to read that. One, Omori is been playing the evil puppet master subconsciously and has been wrecking his life. I don't think that's the case. I think it was a positive transformation, which is weird. But that links up with the messy ending part that we got, because somebody who plays nice doesn't go up and like fight Basil, and like they get into this awful fight. Omori identifies himself as the wicked person and allows himself to be more evil despite what happened, because he's stopped trying to protect himself by pretending to be innocent or by trying to be more innocent to make up for it. He's now allowed himself to be wicked and is just like, that's okay. I'm going to be more evil because why not? And he destroys the demon Basil that mocks us in the previous episode that I played through, and I talk a lot about my hate love of Demon Basil and how he's hilarious, but clearly just there to mock Basil. We destroy that version of Basil, which is easy to confuse with the real thing, but it's not the real Basil. The real Basil is not saccharine like that. The real Basil is a human who's very messy and does try to fix things. And the stranger Basil in Omori's dreams, the stranger Basil in Omori's dreams often says things that would be more appropriate for the real Basil to say. So they're probably attempts for Basil to communicate with Omori. And it's closer to what the real Basil would actually do. Yeah, I want to talk about the game as a whole as well. I've got like a few like pointers up here that I want to go through. Because here's my main thing with this game. I like the ending, but it's really disjointed from the middle of the game. I know that's it's difficult to hear any criticism of a game that is this well made, because they get a lot of things on point experience wise. But when I say that, I want to limit my criticism a lot. I think the ending is very good, and I think the middle of the game is amazing. And I think they're both good as separate pieces, but sometimes the ending doesn't really connect up with the middle, with the struggle to try to find goodness and spiritual answers in your own mental space. I think those are two different things. Which is fine. But I really did like how the ending... The theme of guilt just didn't manifest enough in the middle of the game. But... So it was hard to grasp the ending as it came at you because it felt very different. So, on that note, I'm not going to say and go on and on about that. I want to talk a little bit about the good things that the game does, because I said that and it's like, oh, it's a bad thing, but the point is that it's easy to forget the other parts of the middle of the game, because once you get to the end, it feels very different. The ending does a good job of accurately portraying how harmful and insidious guilt is to people who have lived through traumatic experiences. It's probably the last and hardest thing to get over. In my opinion, I struggle with it all the time, because when somebody chooses to develop their own moral system, you feel a lot more culpable. And this game gets to that directly in a way that really, really hits you. I liked how they mirrored Aubrey's forgiveness with the forgiveness that Omori we're supposed to give Omori at the end of the game. Let's callously stab ourselves. Oh, we can't do it yet. Because Aubrey is someone who does a pretty minor fault, but it's pretty like awful and dangerous. But Omori actually ends up killing Marie. There are people who want to argue that doesn't actually happen. I don't really buy that argument. I think I just take the story as it comes at me. Now, that being said, Omori's father, who's chopping down the tree at the beginning, does appear like maybe he knows, because he disowns Omori as his son in some way. Maybe it's just like mentally, or he actually says it. I don't know. So maybe he knows somehow, which is possible. And perhaps parents may or may not have squashed like an investigation from happening or anything, because they didn't want Omori to suffer anymore from it. But it's pretty clear that Omori's father divorces or leaves after the event because he can't take it. Which is another thing that Omori would be guilty about. I liked how the game ended with Omori taking a strong moral action. It wasn't neat and tidy, but he actually acted, which is what we expected of him. And you know, when you're first making your first moral choices in life, I think they always are messy and you have to live with them on some level. I don't know if anyone remembers being a kid and having to decide between good or bad at some point, and then just being very like unsure. That's how it works, right? When you're starting out, or you're dealing with anything that's really bigger than you are. One small problem, is that you see Stranger Basil make those attempts at connecting with Omori and they fail, but you have to play the game twice to understand what's going on there, so that was a little tough. Because if you don't, it's hard to figure out what Stranger Basil's trying to tell you because you don't know the ending. This is a game that they expect you to play it twice, which is, I think, good. There's a lot of books that do that and things like that in movies. So that's a perfectly valid way to do media. But I encourage anyone who's played this, if they haven't already, to go back and listen very closely to what Stranger Basil says, Shadow Basil, to Omori, because those are Basil's attempts to communicate what's going on. I think in my opinion, they're real, or at least most of them are real memories of Omori talking with Basil or Sunny talking with Basil. Hiro and Aubrey are super realistically portrayed in my opinion. Aubrey's dealing with the situation and her background really makes sense, and her character feels very honest and very detailed. Hiro's the same. I think his commitment to being dutiful is a natural response in the situation. It's like kind of being selfless but also selfish at the same time, but it's natural and normal. I think it's super believable. Kel, I feel like, on the other hand, is realistic, but he almost acts as the protagonist in the stead of Sunny. But you know, he's just trying to go on and live his life normally, and I think Kel handles it the absolute best, so he's like very commendable in that sense. I really like the portrayal of suburban poverty with Aubrey's house. I think I talked about it before, but people stereotype suburbia as a place of like abundance and ease. That's not always the case, and like this game really got it down to a T. Like, what happens if you just don't have that? Aubrey's character is super realistically written. I loved her their approach with her. She's a good role model in a lot of ways. I mean, all three characters are what Sunny wants to become, but in a lot of ways Aubrey is the most important one because she chaotically goes for the morally correct thing and sometimes messes up, which is exactly what the game forces you to do to get the good ending. They force you to say yes to everything, even if it's a bad idea. That's what you have to do. I remember in a previous episode, I said no to even one thing, and I missed a key, and I had to go back and get it. So Aubrey in this game is like the penultimate role model. And funnily enough, she's, as I say this, she's taking the front center row with this group here and talks to us first. So there's a strong connection there between Omori and Aubrey. They do a meta narrative where it's like you are forced to like Omori and Basil, and then you have to forgive them despite the awful ending, which I thought was interesting. It's not necessary, but I can see that being a very powerful storytelling mechanism for many people playing. I was a little bit shocked, of course, to find out the twist ending, no doubt. To me, as awful as it is, it's still like an accident, essentially. Even though we learn about it in a very confusing way, and it's difficult for us at the same time, parallel to Omori, to reason through it in a way that makes sense, that's fair. Not too harsh, but not too easy. But, you know, it's an accident. They honestly check to make sure she's still okay or whatever, and she's just dead. People have said that it's unrealistic. I have a few comments I want to make on that, because I've looked at Reddit. They've said many different reasons for that. One of the unrealistic things, first of all, I'd like to say that people do die from falling downstairs all the time. It's pretty rare, but it does happen. So it's not too unrealistic with that. People can just slip and it can happen, right? That does happen. It's pretty rare, but it can occasionally happen. the fact that they cover up the death as a suicide is also said to be unrealistic. There are two of them. Hanging someone with a jump rope is pretty unrealistic because a jump rope wouldn't support... When someone is hung from a tree, and this is pretty grim and grisly, but this is how it works. If someone is hung from a tree, their body automatically starts kicking and flailing wildly. You can't control it. It's a natural, like, gut reflex that'll just happen. Like, same as someone's drowning or whatever. This is awful to talk about, but this game is going... I mean, we know what this game is about, right? So, anybody looking at someone hanging from a jump rope in a tree would be instantly suspicious, because if you know anything about it, you know that the jump rope isn't really going to hold them unless it's tied very, very well, and the kids can't mimic that, and the jump rope's probably not strong enough. But I'm guessing, my assumption is that Omori's father sees it, realizes it's been faked, looks at some further evidence on the staircase, realizes it was an accident. Or maybe he doesn't realize it's an accident. I don't know. Covers up some of the evidence further and just tells the authorities, or maybe not even the authorities, maybe they just say it's a suicide. I mean, who's going to investigate, right? Probably nobody. I mean, it's very sad. Nobody would accuse someone of being killed in some other way, right? But Omori's dad doesn't take it very well and loses his ability to attain happiness in the family and gives up. Basically. So it would seem to me that's the pieces that I've put together. I think that's the closest thing that fits the text and the evidence that we've got here. On that note, I would like to make another important point that I also noticed while I was watching through the second time. The evil red scenes of the red light appear in connection directly to Omori and Basil's attempts to hide the death. That's the part they specifically feel most guilty about, which makes sense because there is a badness there, a lying, something that hurts people further, but you can't help but do it. That's the part they feel is so bad and sinful. The death, maybe they feel bad about that as well, but there is no red light attached. The red light's attached specifically to the see-through glass window. So that's the part that's considered the very sinful, guilty part. Even though they probably, I mean, the death itself haunts them in the form of the ghost and the evil spirit thing that follows them around. And most importantly, Marie's eye that's in the spirit. The scene of the horrible body is like the haunting image that's stuck with him the longest. Yeah, and I didn't get that. The sense of sin doesn't come from this sort of like, oh, I got angry and I pushed her and I must be a demon. The sense of sin comes from the very deliberate action afterwards to hide the body, which is something that's hard to pretend like that was an accident, right? You couldn't just be like, oh, I accidentally, you know, at some point you have to realize you chose to do that internally. That's the part that they're most guilty about. That's why Basil shares Omori's guilt, because Basil wouldn't share his guilt about killing Marie because he had no part in that. Basil shares Omori's guilt because he was okay with covering it up for maybe semi-altruistic reasons, but really it's not a good thing to do at the end of the day, and there's no way to justify that to oneself. So that's something I missed the first time, and I got to rewatch that again. We see good themes of mocking Basil, degradation of self, monotony, all these things that are accurate portrayals of how depression works, and having a miserable life works. It's awful, but of course everybody wants to forgive Omori and Basil, as bad as it is. I mean, that's the whole question of the game. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to see the good things in other people? You gotta remember, Omori and Basil are pretty likable people. I mean, would we forgive them if they weren't so likable? And pure and innocent? And, you know, they're all like they're not like ugly or anything like that, you know? well, maybe that's a question worth asking to ourselves: is would we forgive them if otherwise? Hopefully, we would. I think we'd all like to think we would. I have to admit, I forgave Omori pretty much right away. That's just like how it went for me. As soon as I understood clearly what the situation was, I was suspicious. I didn't know what the big reveal was going to be, so I was like suspicious of like what actually was going on, but I guess is a bit of a brag, I'm sorry. But not everyone, maybe that was a good moment for some people when they like saw that and they didn't want to forgive them anymore. And it's an important question. Of course, I think people are much more eager to condemn repetitive evil than just like one-time events or even just accidents and things like that. That's just, ooh, I don't want to erase my big fat files. I think though, if you want to like Basil and Omori, you have to like Aubrey just as much because, as I said, she is like the actual role model that leads to like a positive outcome. I think there's a good message in here is to learn to also like the people that are not innocent or are less assertive. You shouldn't just like someone just for purely being innocent and less assertive. I think the message in here is that human beings are very complex and you have to make sure that you don't just base things on like first appearances. Yeah, so the thing about the ending of the game is that it doesn't really connect to some of the stuff that goes on in the beginning of the game. Like the search for Basil and like forgetting what true happiness is and like building up the skills in this part of the game to like create that happy world. But I think, as I was just talking about, I think that's intentional. I was like a little bit like, it's too disjointed. The ending doesn't match anything up the middle, and I've heard complaints about that online. But after thinking about what I just thought about, I realized that that's the point. That's why Omori switches his skill set out from this ones he start with to the creative, more explosive ones that happen later. And what the game is trying to tell us is that you can have a little cute moral system, like in the Divine Comedy or something like that, where you like think about what the wrong thing to do is and reject evil and like try to do like pure thoughts and stuff. But maybe the game is trying to tell us that in fact you have to let yourself be messy in order to get back to a real human soul. Which is very modern, postmodern, Nietzschean style ethics and morality. I think that's what it's saying because you can't get the good ending without getting to some of that evil stuff, and you can't do it without saying yes to a lot of bad things. It is somewhat of a destructive act to pick a fight with Basil while he's in the bathroom. It's not just a pure heroic, like we get to come out clean and nice and tidy and save the day. It's destructive. We go in there and it causes a huge mess, but it's still better than nothing. That's what the game's trying to tell us. It's saying that, like, look, sometimes building up cute little moral skills and things is useful in life. Like, in this game, it's like, you can spend all your time doing that, and it's, maybe for most people, it's not a waste of time, but for real, very, very serious problems, maybe it's just not enough. Maybe that's what it's trying to say. Because it's better to preserve the real Basil than it is to preserve your idea of Basil. It's basically become a mockery in headspace or black space. Oh no, boss fights. I have to say one other thing too. I mean, I'm just gonna probably. I mean, there's a limit to how much I can talk about the ending, but my immediate reaction after viewing the ending, and this is, I think, to its credit, is that I felt super vulnerable after it. When I went out for a walk afterwards and just like remembered what I had played through, like I really felt guilty for no reason at all myself. So that is very powerful for a game to do that. Felt bad. Felt like a bad ending. I think that's why people don't like the ending. It doesn't feel good. I'm supposed to attack him. Right. Like, I felt seriously vulnerable, and like I was trying to justify my behavior for like random stuff, like while I was going for a walk, which is really like crazy. But you know, that's like strong art for you. And as much as you could link some of the ending to the middle of the game, I don't think it was important. Maybe people just don't get this game. This game's just built different. That's what I'm trying to say. I think it's true, though. I think this game plays off of themes we have never seen before, and it's truly original, truly creative. And that's why it's gonna get some flack, because it twists something around. It twists are like, we want to connect and build up to this climax when it says that, look, you've been going about it the wrong way. You have to allow yourself to be wicked. You have to identify as a wicked person in order to make moral structure yourself. In order to, and that involves making mistakes, but more mistakes, but still a better ending, especially in this case. I mean, the world's full of messy things, and the stakes are high in real life all the time. You may not see that the stakes are high, but they are there. So, I think that's what the game's trying to say. I was glad to sit down and think about this game, and I realized this game was going to do something that was going to be difficult to connect with. But that's the point of it, I think. I came in here to learn something new. I didn't come in here to get repeated the same stuff over and over again. I got something out of it that was a little bit different. And it was told in a really direct and real way that it was easy for me to process, which is great. This is, if it's not a perfect game, and I've seen the reviews for it, all right, it's high, but it deserves higher, okay? That's the truth. And like, the critics are all fucking incompetent nowadays. Okay, I'm saying that generally, it's kind of a joke, but in this situation, it makes me specifically mad. It gets like an 85, 87. This is a game that's it's 95, near 100. If there's a few little flaws with it, it is easily forgiven for the fact that it does something completely different. And if people don't pick up on that right away, that's because it's all the more genius, because it doesn't do conventional tropes. It doesn't do truisms. It doesn't do stuff that we've already heard before, because nobody cares about that. I'm sick to death of that shit. It forces you to open your mind a little bit, just a little bit. That's what I came for. I don't know. As an audience member, I think I even fell into the trap where I wanted this headspace world to allow Omori to come to some sort of conclusion about how he should be treating Basil and the situation and coming to terms with the death. We wanted it to we learned some lesson from here that we take out into the wider world. That's like a classic a Odyssey type, like the book Odyssey by Homer. type adventure where you go out on an adventure and you come back with an answer that helps you solve things in the real world. But this game makes fun of that. It flips it on its head, it inverts it. It says no. It says maybe that works sometimes, but clearly Omori's tried it and he's failed. And I think the evidence for that is in Basil. Stranger Basil keeps talking to Sunny and nothing gets through to him. And sometimes Stranger Basil's just bad at communicating, but I don't think part of it's just Sunny's bad at communicating. Or when he's in Omori form, he is. So the headspace thing ultimately fails. Maybe I had wanted it to succeed. I had made it more important than the actual real life thing. I mean, I think we were hoping to come to a solution, which we did. We did. We found the keys, and that was the solution. But that solution had nothing to do with any of this. Except that we had to get out of our comfort zone here. Here's a funny thought, though. Maybe this fantasy world did serve a purpose because it allowed, first of all, from a meta perspective, the player would not play this game if it did not have a cheerful, well, maybe some of us would, but many players wouldn't play unless it had this cheerful section. So this section, kind of in a meta way and in a game way, is a nurturing section that allows us to engage and be interested in the events enough in order to then push out of our comfort zone and find those keys and go to black space. So maybe in some way it's also saying that, look, fantasies are necessary to provide a nurturing environment where your brain is still functioning and isn't depressed. But it's as far as it goes. Maybe our obsession in the modern world with trying to find clear-cut answers in a world of symbols and signs is not effective most of the time. That's what it's telling us. It's effective for nurturing us to a certain extent, even though it can also limit and harm us. But it's not often the answer that we're looking for. That's a classic confusing signs and symbols with the real. We confuse the sign and symbol of Basil here because you can see he's even faded. He's not the real Basil in here. They do that on purpose. He's a symbol, a sign of Basil. We're confusing that with the real Basil, who has changed a lot since then. It's very messy and maybe never really was like this. We've stereotyped Basil in a lot of ways. But on the other hand, I think everybody who watches this wants to try to remember some of their happier memories in life and, you know, think about what's important. Because I spend a lot of this middle of this game trying to remember what was important in my own life. That's a classic theme, and maybe there is some inversion of it in here, but there's also some sort of acceptance that all of the people of the group, especially those who aren't Omori and aren't as burdened by guilt, rely on these positive past memories to make life worth going on. I'm pretty sure anybody who plays this game for the first time or watches it for the first time is going to get some seriously thinking to do out of this game and something out of it. That much is true. I think we're just going to get to Basil's house. Feels appropriate because I'd like to end the game on like a positive note. Because I'm wimpy. That's why everybody wants to see some of the happy stuff. Because you got, after the show ends, you got to go on and live your life, right? Even if it's not really the important part. We want to see more happy stuff at the end. I'm glad that it doesn't end on a super saccharine note, though, because it just makes you think more. Which, like, the important parts of the game are really easy to run away from. That's just how this game is. You're like, ooh, that was horrible and nasty, and some of it was gross. Great, I'm just going to finish this game up quickly and then walk away as fast as I can. In a lot of ways, I did that physically because I went for a walk right afterwards to clear my head. But because it doesn't end on a happy note, it does give you the space to think about it at the end, which I think is a much better approach. I like the secret ending where at least we know, because we've seen the secret ending. I didn't get to it, but I saw it. We know that Omori and Basil at least end up forgiving each other for trying to hide the murder. That's nice. That's really nice to see. Of course, we want to see that. That was satisfying enough for me. For sure. That's super hopeful. As to whether the rest of them forgive it, I mean, we don't know, obviously. I don't comment either way because I think they left it a mystery on purpose. You gotta remember that Omori and Basil knew about it the whole time, but the other three didn't know that it was a cover-up. And so there's an additional harm there. So I could not judge any of the three of them either way of how they take it. We all know that as well as they took Marie's death, none of them took it perfectly. And I mean, there's no guarantees, is there? And we all want to believe that they take it well. I like how this game's honest with the audience and the players. It doesn't try to be too childish. Sometimes it tells them some of the harsh realities. Instead of trying to shrink the audience by babying them too much. The twist ending, we'll call it a twist ending because I think that is somewhat fair, is a bit overly brutal in some sense. It's more than we expected. Omori's, because we know that Sunny is not good at communicating and he's abandoned people. We knew that. We didn't know that he was responsible, even just like in a moment of irritation and accident, of course, for Marie's death. Was that a bit extreme to put that in as the ending? I don't really care. I really just don't care. I couldn't think of a better way to write it. The ending was good. And then when I thought about it and the effect it had, I realized I just didn't care because it did something much more important than just being really good and like well written. It did something far more important than that. Yeah, I was just talking about all that, so I don't have to rehash it, but I think that's way more important than just having something that's super well written and like polished and clean and perfectly tidy and like tightly knit. They're almost two different games, but that's all right. Here's something I'll tell you. If you have dissociative disorder, the real challenge is melding two very different states of being together. And this game forces you to try to meld a bad state with a good state and hash it out. Maybe that's the genius, is that it is disjointed. And it's just an artistic choice. And that the audience's act of trying to knit those two pieces together is another meta thing of Omori trying to knit two pieces together. He's trying to knit himself back together with Basil. He's trying to knit Sunny back together with Omori. And he's trying to knit, like himself back with the group. That's the part that's left up in the air. And the audience has to do that ourselves because we get these two very different stories that they seem like they're not even connected. I mean, we have to do the work. We have to knit this stuff with the nice part that happens earlier. We have to knit black space with all of that goody moralism that we tried to do earlier, where we're like building up moral character and coming through stuff. We have to knit those two things together and reconcile them. And that's the genius of this game. Because it forces the audience to do exactly what the game's trying to tell as a story. And isn't that what video games do? Video games are a higher form of art because they don't just tell a story and put you in some other person's shoes. They force you to have to go through it yourself. In this case, it's a meta sense. We have to think through it ourselves as well and feel through it ourselves and do exactly what the characters do in Omori, which is taking two very mental states and trying to reconcile them. Which is meta, but it's also what video games do, isn't it? Am I wrong about that? I don't know. Crazy stuff. Maybe this is going to be the future of video games. I don't know if anybody out there likes or dislikes meta-ness in like games and stuff, but I think it works here. There's certainly the meta where we're forced to forgive Omori on the spot despite the actions that we now know he does. Oh, we have to stab ourselves, right? Forgot we had the knife already. I'm probably going to cut it after this, the next safe spot I get, and I may or may not continue. I was going to try to fill in the whole video with the other one for the sake of completeness, but I can be pretty wicked sometimes myself, and I don't finish shit that I start, and that's fine. Also, I don't think it's super important. I'm happy to see this part again, at least, so that's good. So I think there was some attempt for Basil to reconcile with Omori. It just didn't work, and that's the real guilt that Omori feels on top of it, is that he rejects Basil's true attempt at intimacy. I don't want to mess with that name. That's wrong. I don't understand that tradition. They give you a name to choose. I'm like, just give me the default, please. Can I save game? In a hot minute. Also, I know Maria's gonna spook me. I've already seen it twice because I saw it once in a YouTube clip because I want to rewatch a few things. I don't want to get spooked again. It's gonna happen. Oh, here's the picnic basket. Good. Okay, we're gonna... Oops, I did save over my other saves. I think the bottom one's the latest anyways. I think I'm gonna end it here. And then I'll do a good think on the other games. And I'll probably move ahead with something after a little bit. Once I've figured out what I want to do. Lisa is disturbing, much like this game, but has a raunchier sense of humor, and Disco Elysium is complicated, which I think would be a good pick for that. And I've got like all those other choices. It's really difficult to say, but yeah, I'll chew on it. it's not super important. I'm glad to have gotten through Omori and um, reached a sense of completeness with it. I'm glad to have had a lot of moments of like fluctuating sense of what the game is trying to tell us. I actually like that. I don't like to be 100%. I like to get a bunch of different messages and then maybe things change by the end. Um, but yeah, that's it for now. Thanks if you're still watching. Sorry about the video essay format thing, but you know, it's just like inevitable, I think, for this. Back to the normal, regular scheduled stuff later. No big deal. Hope you all have a good rest of your day. And you know, thanks for your support, and I will see you again next time. Bye bye.